In December 1983, at an insecticide manufacturing factory in Bhopal, some workers were at work. It was nearly midnight and suddenly some complained that their eyes were burning. They assumed that it was a gas leak. Of course, the workers then started investigating to look for the source of this gas leak, and then a worker came across a dripping liquid. Along with it, a yellowish colored gas was also leaking. The worker told his supervisor what he saw, but the supervisor thought that it was only just water and some minor leaks were common at a plant of such scale. It was unusual though. The supervisor decided to check it out after their tea break. By 12:45 a.m., the smell had become pungent. The worker realized that not only was there a strong smell, but their eyes were burning so badly and they had a bad bout of coughing too. Over the somewhat like next 2 hours, this gas spread all over Bhopal carried by air. It got inside homes and over 2 days, thousands of people lost their lives in this Bhopal gas tragedy. It is believed to be the most dangerous industrial disaster in the world ever. But the biggest question to arise here is, who was responsible for this accident? To find answer to this question, let's understand it deeply. The factory where this disaster took place was a factory of the Union Carbide Company. This company was older than 100 years. And not only batteries and pesticides, this company manufactured rocket fuel as well. In the year 1994, this company was renamed Ever Ready Industry. But olden days in 1962, Union Carbide had launched a poster advertisement for India. These ads were quite metaphorical to understand, but nowadays seeing these ads, a very negative image comes to our mind because of the Bhopal gas tragedy. For instance, Union Carbide was a successful company, and also 49% of the stakes in it was owned by the Indian investors, and even our government has ownerships in it. And after somewhat like 7 years, in 1969, the company started a factory in Bhopal to produce a special insecticide. It was called 7. To manufacture 7, a chemical was needed called methyl isocyanate or MIC. It is a very dangerous and deadly chemical. MIC was imported into India to manufacture 7. Now, in our story, the year 1980 plays a crucial role. This was the year when things began to change, one at a time. At the same time, Union Carbide suffered losses and the company started losing money. Because of the shortage of funds, the company decided that they would start manufacturing MIC in India itself rather than just import it from somewhere. This is the first red flag because manufacturing chemicals and mixing them together is not safe at all. But UCI was granted permission by the government and so they started to do so at the manufacturing plant. Around this time, the company was directed to form a proper evacuation plan in case of danger gas leak and so that the residents of Bhopal would know how to react and how to evacuate because everyone would know that a dangerous chemical will be produced in the plant, right? But the company failed to form any such plans. In fact, in 1981, a worker died from accidental exposure to MIC. But the company took no action despite that. The plant continued in the same way as it was before. During this time, another thing happened. The insecticide that the company was producing, 7, its sales started falling down in India. Many competitors of the company cropped up that had cheaper products of rates and thus now Union Carbide was pressured. Union Carbide had to cut down the cost of their product 7 and the workforce was also reduced. The new workers that were hired by the company were often very underqualified. Safety precautions were ignored to save money. For example, if the pipes were found to be damaged, they'd be repaired by unsafe methods instead of replacing them. Regular leaks started taking place. The workers were worried at the factory. They were working at the factory. They got very worried. But despite that, dangerous chemical was being manufactured at the factory. Neither were the residents of the Bhopal informed about it, nor the workers working at the factory. At this point in time, you'd be thinking that hadn't anybody noticed? Hey, many people did. First, the trade unions in the area started protesting about this, but the union leaders were removed from their jobs and the demands weren't addressed. But there was a man who wanted to investigate this whole issue thoroughly. I told you that a worker died in this plant in 1981, right? A year just before this plant started. That worker was Muhammad Ashraf. Before his death, he had told his friend that he was concerned about this plant. He told his friend Rajkumar Keshwani, a journalist. Rajkumar began investigating about it. He tried to get insider information, accessed confidential reports, and wrote a report on the horrible safety standards of this plant. The heading of his report was Bachaye Huzur is Sheher ko Bachaye. In his report, he mentioned how a disaster can take place there. About 20% of Bhopal's population resided near this plant of Union Carbide, and it was very dangerous for them. It is very interesting to know how he got to know about the underlying dangers, because journalist Rajkumar did not have any scientific knowledge about those chemicals produced. He read somewhere that phosgene was used at the plant. He recalled that it was the same gas used in Germany during the World War II in the gas chambers. He then realized the severity of danger in this situation. The name of his report claimed that if anybody who refused to understand it, it will be their end. The end. Yes, he wrote to the chief minister and even to the Supreme Court. But there was no response at all. Today we can look back to say that he had predicted this deadly disaster. But back then, when disaster hadn't taken place, neither the government believed him nor the company, and even his friends thought that he was just spouting nonsense. Actually, what was happening in that plant was that MIC was being manufactured in that plant, and MIC was stored in liquid forms in three huge tanks underground. E610, E611, and E619 were the tanks. E610 and E611 were filled with MIC completely, and E619 was supposed to remain empty for emergency situations. And for safety purpose, the tanks were supposed to be filled with 60% MIC of the volume of the tanks only. The tanks were not supposed to be filled with more than 60% because MIC plus water has a very dangerous reaction. If MIC gets in contact with water, hey, not only even water, even if it gets into contact with the air, because air contains some amount of moisture, right? The reaction releases a very poisonous and deadly gas. To avoid this, in each tank, the MIC was covered by pressurized nitrogen so that it remained safe in its place. The pressure and the temperature of the tanks were regularly checked. So there were 3 tanks side by side, and there were 2 pipes connected to each tank. One pipe for removing toxic and poisonous gases from the tanks, and another for filling tanks with nitrogen. The routine duty of the workers working here was to clean these pipes regularly, daily in fact, and whenever MIC was taken out to manufacture 7, it was safely taken out of these tanks. As told earlier, there were 3 tanks and none of them were supposed to be filled up with MIC, more than 60%. But they were. At night, the 3rd tank was filled with MIC. More than the approved amount of MIC was stored to save money. And secondly, the pressure of 2 out of the 3 tanks wasn't right. Thirdly, the indicator showing the level of MIC wasn't working. But apart from that, they had an alarm that would go off when the temperature got too high. But the 4th problem was that this alarm was disconnected years ago. So the alarm wasn't working either. Do you remember the first pipe I told you about that helped to remove poisonous gases from the tank, right? The gases from the pipe went into a vent gas scrubber, but the gas scrubber was switched off. The scrubber worked only when a worker would go switch it on. The sixth thing was that each tank had a pressure control valve, but the pressure control valve on the tank E610 wasn't working and no one had repaired it. Apart from all these, Union Carbide plant had stopped manufacturing MIC in October 1984. It means that the company was almost closed off its operation and then they left out MIC in the tanks out were only used when they were needed. And the last and the final problem in the case of any mishap in the factory, there were two huge alarms installed. One of the alarm was for the workers at the factory and the second and the louder alarm was for the residents of the Bhopal residing near the factory. But the other alarm was turned off. So there were so many problems of safety measures that were being ignored and the mistake that already existed on the night of this disaster. As journalist Rajkumar Keshwani had predicted, it didn't take much for an accident to occur here. Now, 2nd December 1984. It was a normal night for the residents of Bhopal. At 9 o'clock in the night, the workers had a shift change and the new workers came into the Union Carbide. They started with their routine work. They started washing the pipes attached to the MIC tanks. They put water in the pipes but noticed something strange while pouring the water, that the water wasn't coming out from the other side of the pipes. They started cleaning the filters, assuming that the water was getting clogged somewhere, and repeated this process of filtering again and again. But despite that, the water didn't come out from the other side. They were surprised to see this and they informed their supervisor around 11 p.m. of the night. The supervisor told the operator to let the water flow and the workers of the next shift would switch off the water later. Fortunately, the slip lines were not there in the pipes. About 10 p.m. of the night, the water started to get into the tank E610, which contained a large amount of MIC. And as I told you, MIC and water had a very deadly reaction. This reaction started happening. Clouds of gases started forming, but the workers present in the factory didn't have much specific knowledge about this. About an hour later, the workers of the new shift arrived. They realized that their eyes were burning like hell. They checked the pressure of the tanks. The pressure was a bit over than normal, but they deemed it to be safe. Now when their eyes didn't stop burning, they figured that there was a leak somewhere and they started looking for it. Around 11:45 p.m., the workers started looking for the leak. One of the workers was Mr. Suman Dey. He said that liquid was dripping at a place. Now, the exact events of the next hour are still debated in the courts, but it is believed that a team of workers ignored the leak and were at their tea break till 12:40 a.m. But some experts believe that the panic had begun before that. The blame is put on some supervisors and the workers because they didn't take this gas leak seriously. Aftermath, the gas was leaking from E610 and which I told you was underground. One of the workers went to the control room and switched on the water pipe. Now the water mixed with this gas and was exploded. By 1 a.m. around, the gas had spread to most parts of the city. A woman recalls how a whitish cloud of gas enters her home. Another smelled the gas and resembled it to the burning of chilies. The next day, the very first thing, Union Carbide's technical team was sent to India and they converted MIC into a less dangerous gas. This was named as Operation Faith. The chief of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson, was arrested the next day. In the year 1985, an act was passed in the Parliament. It empowers the government of India to represent Bhopal people. Then the Government of India and the Union Carbide began their investigations. The main cause of reaction was water and MIC's reaction. Government of India and Union Carbide both claimed each other at fault. Then this court came to court and at an end in somewhat like 1989, when the Union Carbide decided to pay a compensation of $470 million to Indian government. After a few years, Union Carbide and Warren Anderson were declared to be criminals in the court. Then Warren Anderson died of natural causes in 2014. Now also, after that, many laws were passed after all this. But the victims of the disaster are awaiting justice even today. Thank you so much.